The widowed mother accepted a crooked house as a gift from her wealthy employer, but the reason for its tilt would change her life forever. Marianne Turner was a struggling widow with 4 children, barely surviving in the small town of Maple Ridge, Colorado. Her millionaire employer gifted her an old slanted house that nobody wanted, a structure so crooked it seemed ready to collapse, one that everyone in town called the Leaning House. But when she discovered why it leaned so dangerously to one side, when she finally opened the sealed room that made the entire structure tilt, she understood she had received far more than just a roof over her head. And now she would have to defend with her life what generosity had given her. Before we dive into Marianne's incredible journey, if you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to our channel. We're working hard to reach 1,000 subscribers so we can keep bringing you emotional, powerful stories like this one. Your support means everything. Hit that subscribe button now. The smell of sawdust still lingered in Henry Walker's workshop 3 days after they buried him. Marianne stood in the doorway, her fingers gripping the wooden frame until splinters threatened to pierce her skin. The tools hung neatly on their pegboard, each one in its designated spot, just as Henry had left them that Tuesday morning in March 2014, when his heart simply stopped beating. She couldn't bring herself to touch anything. The half-finished rocking chair sat in the corner, its curved runners sanded smooth, but waiting for final assembly. Henry had been making it for their youngest daughter, Ivy, who would turn 6 in 2 months. Now it would remain forever unfinished, a monument to interrupted dreams. Behind her, the house creaked with the weight of 4 children, trying to understand why their father wasn't coming home. Julian, the oldest at 14, had stopped speaking entirely. Renee, 12, cried silently into her pillow every night. Thomas, 8, kept asking when Daddy would wake up. Ivy wandered the house, searching for him in closets and under beds, convinced he was playing hide-and-seek. The bank letter arrived on a Thursday, its crisp white envelope feeling heavy as stone in Marianne's trembling hands. Past due. Final notice. Foreclosure proceedings. The words blurred together through her tears. Henry had been the breadwinner, the steady hand that kept their modest life afloat. His carpentry business had provided enough. Always just enough. But enough disappeared the moment his heart did. Marianne walked through Maple Ridge's main street that afternoon, feeling invisible. Mrs. Patterson, who had brought casseroles when Henry died, suddenly became very interested in her grocery bags when Marianne approached. The Johnsons crossed to the other side of the street. Even Pastor David, who had delivered Henry's eulogy with such passion, offered only a tight smile and a hurried wave before ducking into the post office. The whispers followed her like hungry ghosts. She caught fragments as she passed the corner cafe, where the town's gossip flowed more freely than coffee. 4 kids, no income. What was she thinking? Henry left her with nothing but debts. Someone should call social services. That night, Marianne counted the bills spread across her kitchen table: mortgage, utilities, groceries, school supplies, medical insurance they could no longer afford. The numbers formed an impossible equation, one with no solution she could find. The life insurance policy Henry had mentioned existed somewhere in paperwork she couldn't locate, and even if she found it, the lawyer said it would take months to process. Julian appeared in the kitchen doorway, his thin frame silhouetted against the hallway light. His eyes, so much like his father's, held an understanding no 14-year-old should possess. He didn't ask if everything was okay. He knew better. The breaking point came on a Monday morning when the electricity was shut off. Marianne sat in the dark living room, listening to Ivy ask why the lights wouldn't work, why the refrigerator had gone quiet. Renee heated water on their gas stove for instant oatmeal. Thomas ate his breakfast in silence, his usual boyish energy dimmed by the reality settling over their household like frost. That afternoon, Marianne made a decision that felt like surrendering. She dressed in her only good outfit, a navy dress Henry had loved, and drove her sputtering sedan up the winding road to High Pine Estate. The mansion sat on a hill overlooking Maple Ridge, its white columns and manicured lawns belonging to a different world entirely. Everyone in town knew about Eleanor Whitmore, the widow who had lived there for 40 years, isolated and imperious, rarely seen in public. The iron gate stood open, and Marianne's hands shook on the steering wheel as she drove up the tree-lined driveway. She had no appointment, no connection, no reason to believe this desperate gamble would work. But she had 4 children and 3 days until complete financial collapse. A stern-faced woman answered the massive front door. She looked Marianne up and down with an expression that suggested she'd found something unpleasant on her shoe. Before Marianne could speak, a voice called from inside. "Who is it, Margaret?" "A woman from town, Mrs. Whitmore. No appointment." "Then send her away." Marianne's voice cracked as she called past Margaret into the cool darkness of the entrance hall. "Please, I just need 5 minutes. My husband died. I have 4 children. I'll do anything." Silence stretched for what felt like hours. Then footsteps, slow and deliberate, approached from within. A woman appeared behind Margaret, tall despite her 78 years, with silver hair pulled back severely and eyes that missed nothing. Eleanor Whitmore studied Marianne with an intensity that felt like being X-rayed. "Anything is a dangerous word," Eleanor said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Are you strong?" "Yes, ma'am." "Are you honest?" "Yes, ma'am." "Do you complain?" "No, ma'am." Eleanor's lips curved into something that might have been a smile on a warmer face. "We'll see about that. Margaret, show her to the guest quarters. She starts tomorrow at 6. Marianne worked harder than she'd ever worked in her life. She scrubbed floors until her knees ached, polished silver until her reflection gleamed back at her, washed windows until the glass disappeared. Eleanor watched everything with hawk-like attention, offering no praise but occasionally nodding when something met her exacting standards. The pay was better than Marianne had dared hope, and Eleanor allowed her to bring the children after school to do homework in the kitchen. 3 months passed in a blur of exhaustion and small victories. The mortgage payments resumed. The electricity stayed on. Food appeared on their table every night. Julian started speaking again, helping Thomas with his math homework. Renee joined the school choir. Ivy stopped searching for her father in closets. Then came the day that changed everything. Eleanor's grandson, 12-year-old Christopher, was visiting from Denver. He was a quiet boy who spent most of his time reading by the estate's pool. Marianne was trimming roses nearby when she heard the splash, followed by silence. No laughter, no swimming sounds, just wrong silence. She dropped her shears and ran. Christopher floated face down in the deep end, his arms spread wide, motionless. Marianne didn't think. She dove in fully clothed, her dress billowing around her as she kicked toward him. She grabbed his collar and pulled, fighting the weight of her soaked clothes and his unconscious body, dragging them both to the shallow end. She pumped his chest the way she'd learned years ago in a community first aid class, counting compressions and breathing into his mouth until he coughed and vomited pool water. His eyes opened, confused and frightened, and Marianne held him while he coughed and gasped and finally cried. Eleanor arrived minutes later, alerted by Margaret. She knelt beside her grandson, her usual composure shattered, tears streaming down her face. She held Christopher close, then looked at Marianne with an expression of raw gratitude that transformed her entire face. "You saved him," Eleanor whispered. "You saved my Christopher." 2 weeks later, Eleanor summoned Marianne to the library, a room Marianne had dusted but never truly entered. Eleanor sat behind a massive oak desk, and in front of her lay a single document, a property deed. "I've been thinking about what you said the day you came here," Eleanor began, "that you would do anything for your children. I know that feeling. I would do anything for mine, too. You proved something to me that day at the pool. You proved you possess something rare, selfless courage." She pushed the deed across the desk. "There's a property in town. It's old, neglected. Most people think it's worthless, but I'm giving it to you, free and clear." Marianne stared at the paper, afraid to touch it. "Mrs. Whitmore, I can't." "You can and you will. Consider it payment for a debt I can never truly repay. But Marianne..." Eleanor's eyes held a strange intensity. "When you go to that house, you'll notice something unusual. There's a door that's been locked for many years. Don't try to open it right away. Live in the house first, get comfortable, and when you're ready..." Eleanor leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "What truly matters in that house is behind that door? What secret lay behind that locked door, and why would it determine Marianne's fate? The address on the deed led Marianne to the oldest part of Maple Ridge, where the streets climbed steeply up the hillside and the houses predated Colorado statehood. She drove slowly, checking the numbers on weathered mailboxes until she found it, 347 Prospect Hill Road. Her breath caught in her throat. The house leaned so dramatically to the left that it looked like a strong wind might topple it completely. The wooden siding had faded to grey, paint peeling in long strips that curled away from the boards like dead skin. The front porch sagged in the middle, and every window sat at an odd angle, giving the structure an unsettling, drunken appearance. Julian sat in the passenger seat, his eyes wide. "Mom, that can't be it. That house is falling down." But Marianne checked the deed again and the numbers matched. This crooked, tilting structure was now theirs. She felt a surge of conflicting emotions, gratitude for Eleanor's generosity, warring with dismay at the house's condition. The children piled out of the car, and even 8-year-old Thomas, usually enthusiastic about everything, stood silent. "It looks scary," Ivy whispered, gripping Marianne's hand. The neighbors emerged from their proper, straight houses to watch. An elderly man watering his lawn shook his head slowly. A woman walking her dog crossed to the opposite sidewalk, giving the property a wide berth. Marianne felt their judgment like physical weight, but she squared her shoulders and led her children up the warped walkway. The key turned smoothly in the lock, which surprised her. Inside, the tilt became even more disorienting. Everything pulled left, making her feel like she was walking on the deck of a ship in rough seas. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight, streaming through dirty windows, and the floorboards creaked with each step, but the structure felt solid despite its dramatic lean. The main floor held a living room, kitchen, and small bathroom. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms waited, each one slanting at that same unsettling angle. The furniture would need to be shimmed, pictures would hang crooked no matter how carefully she leveled them, and balls would roll across floors on their own. But it was clean, structurally sound beneath the cosmetic damage, and most importantly, it was paid for. No mortgage, no landlord. Theirs. Marianne was measuring windows for curtains when Renee called from the hallway. "Mum, there's a weird door here." The door stood at the end of the upstairs hallway, set into the wall at the house's most extreme angle. Unlike the other doors, which had simple brass knobs, this one had been reinforced with metal brackets. An enormous padlock hung from a hasp that looked strong enough to secure a bank vault. The wood around the frame appeared darker, older, different from the rest of the house. Marianne touched the lock, feeling its weight and coldness. Eleanor's words echoed in her mind. What truly matters in that house is behind that door. "Can we open it?" Thomas asked, his curiosity overcoming his earlier apprehension. "Not today," Marianne said, though her own curiosity burned like fever. "Let's get settled first. We have plenty to do." They spent the next 3 weeks transforming the crooked house into a home. Marianne cleaned every surface, repaired loose boards, replaced broken windows, and painted the bedrooms in cheerful colors that fought against the building's gloomy lean. The children chose their rooms. Julian took the largest, Renee and Ivy agreed to share, and Thomas claimed the smallest space, which he declared perfect for a future scientist's laboratory. The town's reaction remained cold. At the grocery store, cashiers counted her change with exaggerated care, as if expecting her to cheat them. At school pickup, other mothers formed tight clusters that excluded her. The children came home with stories of classmates who called their house the Leaning Tower of Weirdness, and made jokes about it collapsing. But inside those tilted walls, something remarkable happened. The family grew closer, bound by their shared strangeness. They learned to walk at an angle, to place furniture strategically, to laugh when objects rolled across rooms. Julian built elaborate systems of blocks and books to level surfaces. Renee composed a song called The Sideways Symphony. Thomas conducted gravity experiments by releasing toy cars on the sloped hallways. Ivy drew pictures of the house with a smile on its crooked face. Marianne continued working at High Pine Estate 3 days a week. Eleanor never mentioned the house directly, but occasionally asked how they were settling in. Her eyes held a knowing gleam, and once, when Marianne thanked her again, Eleanor simply said, "Patience. All will be revealed in time." The noises started on a Tuesday night, 6 weeks after they'd moved in. Marianne lay in bed reading by lamplight when she heard it, a soft thud from behind the locked door, followed by a sliding sound, like something heavy shifting position. She sat up, heart pounding, straining to hear. The house settled and creaked constantly. She'd grown used to those sounds. But this was different. This came from inside that sealed room. She told herself it was nothing. Old houses made noise. The dramatic tilt probably caused things to shift as temperatures changed. But the next night she heard it again, and the night after that. Always between 11 and midnight, always the same pattern. Thud, slide, silence. Julian heard it too. He appeared at her bedroom door one night, his face pale in the hallway light. "There's something in that room," he whispered. "It's just the house settling," Marianne assured him, trying to convince herself as much as her son. But doubt had taken root and was growing. What had Eleanor meant? Why seal a room so completely? What could be behind that door that mattered so much? The questions consumed her thoughts during the day and invaded her dreams at night. She found herself standing in front of that door for long minutes, studying the lock, calculating whether she could break it open. On a Saturday morning, while the children were at the library with a school group, Marianne called Eleanor. The phone rang 4 times before the familiar authoritative voice answered. "Mrs. Whitmore, it's Marianne. I need to ask you about the locked room." A long pause. Then Eleanor spoke, her voice carrying an emotion Marianne had never heard from her before, something like anticipation mixed with satisfaction. "Are you ready to see what's inside?" "I don't know, but I keep hearing sounds, and I can't stop thinking about it." Eleanor's laugh surprised her, warm and almost excited. "Good. That means the time has come. Go to my estate tomorrow at noon. Come alone. I have something to give you, and something important to tell you." The line went dead before Marianne could respond. She stood holding the phone, her pulse racing. Tomorrow she would finally learn the truth about the crooked house and its mysterious sealed room. That night the sounds were louder than ever. Not just thuds and slides, but something that almost sounded like settling, as if a great weight was redistributing itself. Marianne pressed her ear to the door, feeling the old wood cool against her skin. The house leaned heavily in this spot, the floor sloping dramatically toward that locked room. What if the weight of whatever was inside was causing the entire house to tilt? The thought should have frightened her, but instead she felt a strange thrill. Eleanor Whitmore, one of the wealthiest women in Colorado, had specifically chosen this house for her, had sealed that room decades ago, had waited for the right person to receive it. Marianne placed her palm flat against the door, as if she could sense what lay beyond through touch alone. Tomorrow she would know. Tomorrow everything would change. What secret had Eleanor hidden behind that door, and why had she chosen Marianne to receive it? News traveled fast in Maple Ridge, carried on whispers through the corner cafe and the post office, through church pews and grocery store aisles. Within 2 weeks of Marianne opening the sealed room, people noticed changes. Fresh paint brightened the crooked house's exterior. New curtains appeared in the windows. A contractor's truck was spotted in the driveway, though Marianne told no one what work was being done inside. The questions multiplied. How could a widow with no income afford renovations? What had Eleanor Whitmore really given her? The speculation grew darker, more suspicious. Some suggested Marianne had blackmailed the old woman. Others whispered about affairs and illegitimate children. The town's judgment, already cold, turned hostile. Cassian Whitmore heard the rumors in Phoenix, where he managed a failing real estate investment firm with money borrowed from his aunt. At 43, he'd spent his entire adult life waiting for Eleanor to die, calculating his inheritance, making plans for the Whitmore fortune he considered rightfully his. When his mother called to tell him Eleanor had given away a valuable property to her housekeeper, his rage was immediate and consuming. He arrived in Maple Ridge on a Tuesday afternoon, driving a leased luxury sedan he couldn't afford, wearing a suit that projected success he didn't possess. Cassian had his grandfather's sharp features, but none of his character. His ambition curdled into entitlement. He checked into the Mountain View Inn and began making calls. By Wednesday morning, he knew everything the town gossips could tell him about Marianne Turner. Widow, 4 kids, worked for Eleanor. Somehow acquired the old Whitmore property on Prospect Hill. The house that leaned. The house his grandfather had owned. The house that should have been his. Cassian appeared at Marianne's door just as she was preparing dinner. Through the screen, she saw a man who looked vaguely familiar, with Eleanor's aristocratic bone structure twisted into something sharper, hungrier. He didn't introduce himself, simply pushed open the screen door and stepped inside, uninvited. "You're living in my family's property," he stated, his eyes already cataloguing everything in the room, searching for evidence of wealth. "I'm Marianne Turner, and you are?" "Cassian Whitmore, Eleanor's nephew and heir. I think we need to discuss how you manipulated an elderly woman into signing over valuable real estate." The accusation hung in the air like poison. Marianne felt her children's presence behind her. Julian had emerged from his room, and Renee held Ivy's hand in the hallway. She kept her voice steady despite the anger rising in her chest. "Your aunt gave me this house as a gift. The deed is legal and recorded." Cassian's smile held no warmth. "Legal doesn't mean ethical. An old woman, isolated, befriended by a desperate employee who knows exactly which buttons to push. I've seen this pattern before. But here's the thing, I'm willing to be reasonable. I'll buy this dump from you, $20,000. That's more than generous for a structure that's literally falling over. It's not for sale." His expression hardened. $40,000, final offer. Take it, or I'll make your life very difficult. "Get out of my house." Cassian moved closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper that the children couldn't hear. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. This property has been in my family for generations. Whatever my aunt told you, whatever promises she made, they mean nothing. I will get this house back one way or another, and if you fight me, I'll destroy you." He left without another word, but his threat lingered like smoke. Marianne locked the door with shaking hands, then gathered her children and assured them everything was fine, even as fear coiled in her stomach. She'd dealt with grief, poverty, and isolation, but she'd never dealt with someone actively working to harm her. The next morning, an official notice arrived from the Maple Ridge Building Department. A complaint had been filed regarding structural safety at 347 Prospect Hill Road. An inspection was scheduled for the following week. Failure to pass would result in immediate evacuation and potential condemnation. Marianne called Eleanor, her voice breaking as she explained what was happening. The older woman listened in silence, and when she spoke, her tone carried steel. "Cassian has always been a vulture. He thinks intimidation will work because it's worked before on weaker people. But you're not weak, Marianne, and neither am I. Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you." Eleanor's plan was precise and practical. Marianne would take a single gold coin from the sealed room, just one, nothing that would be missed, to a trusted antiquities dealer Eleanor knew in Denver, a man named Robert Chen, who specialized in historical artifacts and asked no unnecessary questions. He would pay fair market value in cash, providing Marianne with funds to hire the best structural engineer in Colorado to inspect and document the house's condition. "The house is sound," Eleanor explained. "Thomas built that vault to last centuries. The lean is dramatic but stable. Any qualified engineer will confirm this. Get ahead of Cassian's game. Have your own inspection done before the city's scheduled visit." That Friday, Marianne drove 2 hours to Denver with a single 1891 silver dollar wrapped in a handkerchief. Robert Chen's shop occupied a narrow building in an old neighborhood, its windows filled with antiques and curiosities. The man himself was elderly, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He examined the coin under a magnifying glass, consulted reference books, and finally named a figure that made Marianne's breath catch: $12,000. "It's in pristine condition," he explained, "uncirculated from a limited mint run. For a collector, this is quite valuable." He counted out cash with the discretion Eleanor had promised, asking no questions about where Marianne had acquired such a treasure. With that money, she hired Thomas Morrison, a structural engineer whose credentials filled 2 pages. He spent 6 hours examining every beam, joist, and foundation stone of the crooked house. His report was comprehensive and definitive. The structure was sound, the lean was stable and had been for decades, and the property posed no safety risk to its occupants. The foundation had been reinforced with techniques ahead of their time, and the unusual weight distribution, while creating the dramatic tilt, had actually settled into equilibrium. The house could stand for another century without issue. When the city inspector arrived the following Tuesday, he found Marianne waiting with Morrison's report, her own engineer's stamp of approval and documentation proving the house met all safety codes. The inspector, a tired man named Rodriguez, who clearly resented being used as a weapon in someone else's fight, spent an hour confirming what Morrison had already established. "House is fine," he told Marianne, signing off on the paperwork. "Weird, but fine." Whoever complained wasted everyone's time. Cassian received the news within hours. His mother reported that he'd thrown his phone across his hotel room, cracking the screen. But Marianne felt no satisfaction in his frustration, only growing dread. Men like Cassian didn't accept defeat. They escalated. Her instinct proved correct 3 nights later when Julian woke her at 2 in the morning, his voice urgent and frightened. "Mom, there's someone outside. I saw flashlights near the side of the house." Marianne moved to the window, her heart pounding. In the darkness, 2 beams of light played across the exterior wall, the wall where the sealed room was located. She watched as the lights moved systematically, and then she saw him. Cassian Whitmore, illuminated briefly by his companion's flashlight, holding what looked like a metal detector against the old wood siding. He'd figured it out. He knew something valuable was hidden in that house, and now he was planning to take it. What would Cassian do when he discovered the truth behind that wall, and how far would he go to claim what he believed was his? Sleep had become difficult for Marianne since discovering the vault. Every creak of the house, every whisper of wind against the windows pulled her from rest. She lay awake most nights, listening to the sounds of her children breathing in nearby rooms, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake by accepting Eleanor's gift. Wealth without safety felt like a curse rather than a blessing. The clock on her nightstand glowed 3:17 a.m. when she heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps on gravel. Not the random sounds of nocturnal animals or wind-blown debris, but deliberate human movement. Marianne's heart lurched as she sat up, straining her ears in the darkness. There it was again, followed by the low murmur of male voices discussing something just below her window. She crept to the glass, careful not to disturb the curtain, and peered into the moonlit yard. 2 figures moved along the side of the house, their flashlight beams scanning the exterior wall with systematic precision. One man held what looked like a handheld device, moving it slowly across the old wooden siding. The other carried a crowbar, its metal surface catching the moonlight in silver flashes. Marianne's blood turned to ice when the second man's face was illuminated by his companion's flashlight. Cassian Whitmore. His expression held focused determination as he studied the wall, pointing to specific spots and speaking urgently to the other man. They were directly outside the sealed room, and the device in the first man's hands could only be a metal detector. They'd found it. They knew exactly where the vault was located, and from the tools they carried, they planned to break through the wall tonight. Panic flooded Marianne's system, but she forced herself to think clearly. Screaming would alert them that she was awake. Calling the local police might take too long. By the time officers arrived from the station 15 minutes away, Cassian could have breached the wall and disappeared with whatever he could carry. She needed help now, and she needed someone with authority that Cassian would respect. Her hands shook as she dialed Eleanor's number. The phone rang 4 times, an eternity measured in racing heartbeats, before the older woman's voice answered, surprisingly alert for the late hour. "Marianne, what's happened?" "Cassian is here, outside the house. He has someone with him and they're trying to break into the sealed room. They have a metal detector and tools. Eleanor, they know." A pause, then Eleanor's voice turned hard as steel. "Lock your bedroom door and stay away from the windows. I'm calling Sheriff Morrison directly. Do not confront them. Do you understand?" "Yes, but—" "Stay on the line with me." Marianne heard Eleanor making another call, her voice sharp and commanding as she spoke to someone about a break-in in progress, about her nephew violating a restraining order Marianne hadn't known existed, about protecting a family in immediate danger. The authority in Eleanor's tone carried the weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed by everyone, including law enforcement. Outside, the sounds changed. A sharp crack of wood splintering made Marianne gasp. They'd started breaking through the siding. She could hear Cassian's voice more clearly now, urgent and excited. "There, right there. The detector's going crazy. There's metal behind this wall, a lot of it." The other man's voice responded, rougher and less educated. "This is breaking and entering, man. You said this was legal." "It's my family's property. She stole it. We're just taking back what belongs to us." Another crack of wood, then another. They were making progress, working faster now, probably afraid someone would hear. Marianne's children still slept, exhausted from their long day at school, but Julian's room was close to where the men were working. If they broke through, if they got inside the house— "Eleanor, they're breaking through the wall," Marianne whispered into the phone, her voice barely controlled. "Sheriff Morrison is 2 minutes away. Stay where you are." Those 2 minutes stretched like hours. Marianne heard more wood splintering, heard Cassian's triumphant laugh as the metal detector's signal grew stronger. She imagined them creating a hole large enough to climb through. Imagined them in that sacred room with their greedy hands on Thomas Whitmore's carefully preserved collection. Worse, she imagined them encountering her children, imagined what desperate men might do when cornered. Then, blessed sound, sirens. Distant at first, but growing rapidly closer. The noise outside the house stopped immediately. Through the window, Marianne saw Cassian's flashlight beam swing wildly as he tried to assess the situation. The other man was already running, dropping his crowbar as he sprinted toward the back of the property. "Police, don't move!" Red and blue lights painted the crooked house in alternating colors, creating a surreal strobing effect through the tilted windows. Car doors slammed, and multiple voices shouted commands. Marianne heard Cassian attempting to explain, his tone shifting from panic to false confidence. "I'm Eleanor Whitmore's nephew. This is my family's property. That woman inside has illegally—" "Mr. Whitmore, you're in violation of a restraining order. Put your hands behind your back." "This is ridiculous. You don't understand. There's a fortune hidden in this house and she's—" "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." Marianne sank onto her bed, her legs no longer able to support her weight. Her entire body trembled with delayed shock as adrenaline crashed through her system. Eleanor's voice still emanated from the phone, calm and reassuring. "Marianne, are you there?" "Yes, they've arrested him." "Good. Stay inside until Sheriff Morrison knocks on your door. He's expecting you." 5 minutes later, Marianne opened her front door to a tall man in his 50s, wearing a sheriff's uniform and an expression of professional concern. Behind him, she could see Cassian in the back of a patrol car, his face twisted with rage as he shouted something she couldn't hear through the closed window. Sheriff Morrison introduced himself and asked to see the damage. Marianne led him to the side of the house, where a gaping hole had been torn in the siding. Shattered boards hung at odd angles, and through the gap the old inner wall was visible. Another 10 minutes of work, and they would have broken through completely. "Mrs. Whitmore filled me in on the situation," the sheriff said, his voice kind but serious. "This is the second restraining order violation by Mr. Whitmore in 3 days. Add attempted breaking and entering, attempted theft, and we've got enough to hold him for a while. The accomplice got away, but we have a good description." "What happens now?" Marianne asked, wrapping her arms around herself against the night chill. "Now you get a security system installed. Mrs. Whitmore's already arranged it. Crew will be here tomorrow morning. And Mr. Cassian Whitmore learns that some fights aren't worth having." After the sheriff left, after she'd checked on her sleeping children and assured them everything was fine when they woke to the commotion, after she'd secured the house as best she could, Marianne stood before the sealed room door. The vault had nearly cost her everything tonight. Cassian's greed had almost turned her gift into a nightmare. Her phone rang just before dawn. Eleanor's voice was different now, tired but satisfied. "I've made a decision, Marianne. I'm changing my will. Cassian and every other Whitmore will get nothing. Everything goes to charitable trusts, education funds, historical preservation, social services. They've proven they don't deserve my family's legacy, but you and your children, you've proven you do. Eleanor, I don't know what to say. Say you'll be careful. Say you'll protect what Thomas left behind, and say you'll live the life that man like my nephew will never understand, one built on courage rather than entitlement." As the sun rose over Maple Ridge, casting long shadows across the crooked house, Marianne understood that she'd survived the worst. Cassian's arrest had removed the immediate threat. But she also understood that protecting her children and their future would require constant vigilance. The vault behind that locked door had given her everything, but it demanded everything in return. How would Marianne transform her hard-won fortune into the future she'd dreamed of? And what would become of the crooked house that had changed her life forever? The morning after Cassian's arrest, Marianne stood in the sealed room as golden sunlight streamed through the hallway window, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny spirits around Thomas Whitmore's collection. She ran her fingers along the spine of a leather-bound Bible dated 1776, feeling the weight of history and responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. This room had nearly destroyed her family. Now it would save them. Robert Chen became her trusted advisor over the following months. The elderly antiquities dealer visited the crooked house personally, his eyes widening as he catalogued the collection's scope and significance. He explained which pieces held purely monetary value and which belonged in museums, which could be sold discreetly, and which should be preserved for future generations. "This isn't just wealth," he told Marianne, his voice reverent as he examined a silver chalice from Plymouth Colony. "This is American history. Thomas Whitmore created a time capsule. What you do with it matters." They developed a careful strategy. Marianne would sell only what was necessary, one piece at a time, never flooding the market or drawing unwanted attention. Each transaction was documented, taxes were paid, everything remained legal and traceable. The first sales funded immediate needs, a proper house in a better neighborhood, security systems, college funds for the children. Later sales would support their education, healthcare, and future dreams. Within 6 months, the Turner family moved into a beautiful craftsman home on Elm Street, near the center of Maple Ridge, where other families welcomed them with genuine warmth. The house stood straight and true, with level floors and windows that opened easily, with a backyard where Thomas could build his science experiments and Ivy could play without judgment. But Marianne kept the crooked house. She had the damaged wall repaired, installed state-of-the-art security, and reinforced the sealed room with additional locks and sensors. The vault remained her secret sanctuary, visited only when necessary, treated with the reverence it deserved. Some neighbors still called it the Leaning House, but now they said it with curiosity rather than mockery, wondering about the widow who'd made something beautiful from everyone else's cast-off. Julian flourished in ways that made Marianne's heart ache with pride. The quiet, withdrawn boy who'd stopped speaking after his father's death transformed into a confident young man. With proper tutoring and resources, his natural gift for mathematics emerged fully. At 15, he was accepted into an advanced program at Colorado State University, studying alongside college students and holding his own. He talked about his father often now, sharing memories with his siblings, keeping Henry's spirit alive through stories and laughter. Renee discovered her voice, literally. With professional music lessons funded by the sale of a single colonial-era silver plate, she joined an elite youth choir that performed across Colorado. Her clear soprano filled churches and concert halls, and when she sang, Marianne saw Henry's joy reflected in their daughter's face. Music became Renee's way of processing grief, transforming pain into something transcendent and beautiful. Thomas embraced his role as the family scientist with enthusiastic chaos. He built elaborate experiments in their new backyard, testing theories about gravity, motion, and chemistry, with the fearless curiosity of a child who finally had resources to explore his questions. Marianne funded a proper laboratory setup in their garage, complete with safety equipment and educational materials. His teachers reported that he asked questions that challenged them, that pushed everyone to think deeper. Ivy, the youngest, blossomed from a frightened child searching for her lost father into a confident kindergartner who made friends easily and approached each day with infectious optimism. She received specialized educational support that helped her reading skills develop, and she joined a community theater program where she discovered a love of performance. When she played pretend now, she was a scientist like Thomas, a singer like Renee, or a mathematician like Julian. Her imagination had no limits. We're so grateful you've stayed with us through Marianne's incredible journey. If this story moved you, Please subscribe to our channel and share it with someone who needs hope today. Your support helps us create more powerful, emotional stories that remind us all that life can change in unexpected and beautiful ways. Hit that subscribe button now. We're almost at 1,000 subscribers, and we couldn't do this without you. Eleanor Whitmore became the grandmother the children had lost when Henry's parents passed years before. She attended Julian's academic presentations, Renee's concerts, Thomas's science fairs and Ivy's theatre performances. The stern, isolated woman who'd lived behind iron gates transformed into someone warm and present, someone who laughed at Thomas's jokes and braided Ivy's hair before school plays. She hosted Sunday dinners at High Pine Estate, where the children ran freely through rooms that had been silent for decades, filling them with noise and life and love. On a crisp autumn afternoon, 2 years after receiving the Crooked House, Marianne gathered her children and drove to Prospect Hill Road. They parked in front of the tilted structure, which looked smaller now somehow, less intimidating than it had that first day. Fresh paint gleamed on the repaired siding. The security system's cameras watched over it like protective eyes. Inside that sealed room, Thomas Whitmore's collection waited patiently, a fortune that would fund her children's futures for generations. The 4 children stood with their mother on the warped walkway, studying the house that had changed everything. Neighbors passing by waved now, friendly rather than suspicious. The Crooked House had become part of Maple Ridge's character, a landmark that proved something important about resilience and transformation. "Why do we keep it?" Ivy asked, holding Marianne's hand and tilting her head to match the house's angle. "If we have the new house." Marianne knelt beside her youngest daughter, gathering all 4 children close. Julian stood tall and strong at 16. Renee's eyes held wisdom beyond her 14 years. Thomas bounced with barely contained energy at 10. And Ivy, now 7, looked at her mother with complete trust. "Because this house taught us something important," Marianne said, her voice steady and sure. "When your father died, everyone looked at us and saw a broken family, something damaged, something that couldn't stand. Just like they looked at this house and saw something worthless. But we weren't broken. We were just carrying weight that nobody could see. And that weight, all that pain and struggle, it made us stronger. It brought us here." She gestured to the tilted structure, its dramatic lean catching the afternoon sunlight. "This house looks crooked because it's holding something precious, and we looked broken because we were holding love for your father and fear for our future and hope that somehow we'd survive. But we did more than survive. We built something beautiful from what everyone else thought was worthless." Julian put his arm around his mother's shoulders. "Dad would be proud." "He would be," Marianne agreed, tears streaming down her face. Happy tears now, healing tears. "He'd be so proud of all of you." They stood together in silence, a family forged by loss and strengthened by love, looking at the impossible house that had given them everything. Inside its tilted walls, history waited. Outside, in the clear Colorado air, their future stretched limitless and bright. Marianne pulled her children closer, breathing in the moment, the smell of autumn leaves, the warmth of their bodies pressed against hers, the sound of Ivy's laughter as Thomas made a joke about the house's angle. This was wealth. This was what Thomas Whitmore had understood when he wrote that his fortune should go to someone who knew its true value. "Sometimes," Marianne whispered, speaking to her children and to herself and to the memory of the man who'd hidden a treasure for someone worthy, "what looks crooked is just filled with history and love." The Crooked House stood behind them, leaning into its burden, carrying its impossible weight with quiet dignity. Just like them. Just like everyone who survives the unthinkable and discovers that broken things, when held together with love, become stronger than anything that was never tested. They drove home as the sun set over Maple Ridge, casting the town in golden light, and Marianne knew with absolute certainty that they would be okay. More than okay. They would be extraordinary.